Hello, kids. Today I want to talk to you about the Peavey ValveKing. This bad boy right here. This is an older one, so it doesn't have some of the accoutrements that are supplied on the latest version. But these things have been around for 10 or so years. Now let me tell you a story how I ended up with this ValveKing. Started having problems with my Marshall JCM 900. I had to let it go. I had it repaired, and a month later it failed again, and I just couldn't keep throwing money into an amplifier because I'm poor. So I went and I sold it, and I needed a high watt, high gain amplifier for the bigger outdoor gigs that I do during the summer sometimes. And so I got a Randall, what was it, an RX 120H solid state head. You know, Randalls have a real good reputation with their solid state stuff. It works well, it sounds good, and it did. It sounded really nice. It did the job. It got loud. It would crunch. It would take pedals, but I really like, you know, the crisp, warm feeling of tubes. With solid state, you don't get the warm feeling. You get the crisp feeling. You got a nice crisp sound coming out of it, but you don't have the warmth of a tube amplifier. So I kept that for a few weeks. I think I did, you know, I did everything I could with it and played with it, and I liked the sound. It was really good, but there was just that little bit lacking. So I went and took that back, got my money back for that, and I bought a used Marshall MA100H. The MA's got a real bad rap. They weren't around very long, and I found out why. I had it all 4 days and watched, I don't know if you know what red plating is, but it's when the plates inside the power tubes glow red hot metal. Two of the tubes started plating in it. And I'm like, that's it. I'm not spending any money to repair an amp that I just bought. I bought it from a local chain. And I took it back. And I went, that was about 20 miles from here, from where I live. Then I went up to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now this is where I want to get specific because I want to give props to these guys. I found an old Carvin MTS 3200, which is very Marshall JCM 900-ish. Carvin's kind of answer to the JCM 900. I found it up at a music go-round in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So I went up there. I went and I beat the crap out of the thing for about 20 minutes in their loud room, and it was fine. It sounded good. It was really loud. I had to stop because it was hurting my ears. And I bought it. And I brought it home, and as soon as I fired it up, I let the tubes warm up. It failed. Lots of noise, lots of like roaring hiss and volume up and down, and then it settled in a very, very pinched, very compressed sounding tone. So obviously there was something wrong with the amp and transporting it from Kenosha, Wisconsin to Elgin, Illinois here. Jarred something, and it wasn't going to work. I don't know if it was power tubes were an issue or what was going on, but I wasn't about to start messing with that. So I called them, told them what was going on. They said, bring it back. So I drove that same day. I drove back up to Kenosha, Wisconsin, returned them the amp, and they had this, Peavey ValveKing. And I went and tried it out. I played it for a while, and it sounded really good. And I was like, okay, I'll give this one a shot, and I'll let you know what happens. Well, that was last week. And I have been, or wasn't it? Maybe, no. It was early this week. I'm sorry. It was like Monday or Tuesday this week. But I've been pounding on it ever since. This amp is solid. It's clean. It hasn't even given any kind of indication that it might have a problem. It just works. And it does it really well. So let's get on with the review and the demo. All right. I'm going to be using Boss pedals, all Boss, and I'm going to use the Peavey's Crunch channel as well. we're going to start off with clean, with Boss chorus and Boss digital delay, and my trusty Gibson SG standard. The amp is fairly clean. You might be able to hear the little bit of hum in there, a little bit of white noise, but it's actually one of the cleaner tube amps that I've messed with. Most of them are pretty noisy. Now I've got the volume wide open on my SG here. I'm using both pickups. This guitar is standard SG, all stock. All right. Okay, that's with the modulation pedals that I'm using are plugged into the effects loop, which is right on the front. Really nice, warm, crisp, clean sound there. Now I'm going to show you the Overdrive channel. Okay, and then there's also a boost. So here I'll play, I'll jump into the boost here. All right, that's the overdrive and boost. Now, into the front of the amp, I've got 3 distortion pedals. I've got Blues Driver, DS1, distortion, and MD2 Mega Distortion. And I'm going to go through all 3 of them just so you can see how it takes the pedals in the front end of the amp. Here's the Blues Driver. That's the Blues Driver. This is the DS1, the straight old school Boss distortion. so there's the DS1, and then the Mega Distortion. Okay, and I want to show you one more thing. This amp also has a built-in reverb. It's got an actual tank. I think the new ones have a digital, but this one has an actual reverb tank inside. And I'm just going to put it to half and show you what it sounds like with the amp's reverb. There you go. I got to say, I'm really pleased with this amp. I've got it sitting on top of my Carvin 412. It's an old 1990 412 cabinet. It's a 400-watt cabinet with rebranded Celestions in it. The cabinet sounds really good. It works well with the amp. So I'm nuts about the Carvin stuff because it's cheap. The used stuff is really easy to get, and it's pretty much bulletproof. Good birch ply construction on the cabinets, good speakers in the cabinets, really good workmanship all the way around. They're made in the USA, and they're a lot cheaper than a Marshall cab, by probably about, they're a quarter of the price of a Marshall, in really good shape. A Marshall 1960A, I've seen them going for $400 to $600 used, sometimes even more than that. And I mean, at $400, you're getting one that's pretty beat up. These things are like 200 or less. Back to the ValveKing. I can't say enough good things about this amp. I've been beating the crap out of it every day since I brought it home. I went and simulated a gig situation, and I played it hard, really loud, put on earmuffs and played it, at full out volume for 45 minutes, threw it on standby, put the guitar down, went and had a cup of coffee, came back, flipped it off standby, went and did it again. I did that throughout the day for about 5 hours and just pushed the amp and got it really hot and kept it hot. And it never even seemed like it wanted to have a problem. It just worked. So, yeah, they're made in China, but I'll tell you what, this right here is a great bang for your buck. You can pick them up used for between $200 and $250. The worst you might have to do with a used one of these is replace the tubes. I did not replace the power tubes. It still has the original Ruby factory tubes. But I did replace the preamp tubes because I do that with every tube amp I get because I have a magic set of tubes that I use, and that is a Tungsol 12AX7 in V1, a Electro Harmonix 12AX7EH in V2, and a Sovtek 12AX7 LPS in V3 in the phase inverter position. That's a long plate tube, and it does really well in that position. That's what sets up your audio to go to the power tubes. So you can look that up. It's a known combination that works really well. The reason I use the different tubes in the different positions is the tongue saw in V1. That's your first, input gain and sound. It's a very broad sounding tube. It gives you a really nice response. It's got good attentiveness to your picking, and you get the frequency response is pretty wide. The Electro-Harmonics in V2, that's your second gain stage. When you're in gain, you're hitting that one. The Electro-Harmonics doesn't have as much bottom end as the tongue saw does. So if an amp tends to get kind of soggy when you go into gain and you're chunking on the low frequencies, the Electro-Harmonics tends to tighten that up, and you lose the sag and still keep a nice tight sound. And then, like I said, the Sovtek LPS in P3 or V3 in the phase inverter position, really it does a really good job of taking that wide frequency band of sound and setting it up and sending it to the power tubes so that the power tubes can then do their thing with it. And I should also say about this amp has a presence and resonance knobs. What they do is they work not with your EQing on your preamp. They're more like a power section EQing. They work with the power tubes. The presence determines the high frequencies that are going to pass through the power tubes and how the power tubes are going to handle the highs. And the resonance works with the low end. And what I do, I keep them right up the middle. I don't boost either one. I keep them right there, and I let the power tubes get the full brunt of everything. And I don't want to boost the lows. I don't want to boost the highs at the power tubes. I want to let the power tubes do their thing. So I just keep it right up the middle. EQ settings are however you want to put them. Whatever sounds good to your ears. It also has two inputs, a high and low impedance. Input 1 is for passive guitars, humbuckers, single coils, and input 2 is for guitars with active pickups. It also has on the rear a contour control, and what they say this does is it simulates A-class or AB class tube amplifier behavior. It's an AB tube amp, okay? I've read the electrical description of how this works, but basically what it does when you have the knob turned all the way to AB, that's your amp, acting normally. When you turn it all the way over to A-class, it's not actually an A-class amp, but what it does is it cuts out two of the tubes, and it runs it like an A-class amp so that it would sound like an A-class amp. And what supposedly what it does is it gives you a sweeter tone at lower volumes. It keeps the amp thick if you want to play at bedroom levels, which is great for bedroom players. If you got a half stack, most amps you can't do that with. Even if you pull two tubes out, you are still going to sound pretty thin at low levels. This amp does not. This amp sounds pretty good at low levels. I mean, what I'm playing at right now is not a very high level. I don't have it anywhere near cranked. So, like I said, I can't say enough good things about the Peavey ValveKing. This amp is rock solid. This particular one is about 10 years old, and it's still chunking along. It obviously hasn't seen a whole lot of use because it's still in pretty good shape cosmetically. I mean, even the corners aren't all dinged up. And it still has the factory power tubes. Actually, it had all the factory tubes. The tubes that the specs say it came with, it had in it. It had 2 JJs and a 12AX7, which is what it came with from the factory in the preamp side. And it still has, I left the Ruby tubes alone because they're still working. There's no issues with them. There's no reason to change them, so I didn't. And that's, about $60 to retube the power section. So I'll wait until one starts to fail before I pull them out. Plus, there's no from what I understand, what I've read, I haven't pulled the chassis out, but from what I've read, there's no bias adjustment setting or bias adjustment monitor points on the inside of the chassis. So if you're going to set bias, you have to do it with a soldering iron and a resistor, and that's removing the existing bias resistors. There may be one, there may be two, I don't know how it's set up, and putting in a resistor value that brings the bias voltage to where it's supposed to be. So, you know, if you want to put in new tubes, it's kind of a chore if you're going to do it yourself, or it's going to cost some money if you have to take it to your local amp tech. Anyway, that's it. Peavey ValveKing, rock solid, super affordable, high watt, high gain tube amp. I like it a lot. I don't miss my Marshall. This thing is, I think it's just as good sounding as the Marshall was, and I like it even better because it costs less money, a lot less money. So, y'all be the judge. You see one at your local music store, go try one out, bring it home, beat the snot out of it. You will be pleased. Anyway, peace!